Terry is well known among this group and has always been well received. He's an internationally acclaimed speaker, author, executive coach, and consultant on the topics of human capital optimization and organizational design. He is the owner and founder of Employee Performance Strategies and the leading authority in helping organizations maximize their financial results by optimizing their workforces. Today, Terry will talk about leadership in an uncertain future and what we all can do as current leaders and future leaders to ensure we're post-pandemic ready. Mr. Terry?
All right, well, thank you, Morgan, and good afternoon, everyone. And it's indeed an honor for me to share the Greg Martin Legacy Series with you. I consider Greg a dear friend. Several years ago, Greg and I believe it was the Minneapolis meeting, that Greg and I talked about exactly what we're doing today, some kind of continuous education for the members. I mean, one thing I really admired about Greg was he was always looking to add more value to the members. So I know he's with us today on this very first one, and I just hope I don't screw it up. So why don't we begin? You know, no one's going to argue that leadership has always been important. That's never been in question. But I would argue leadership today is more important than ever because we've been thrown into violent, uncharted waters, mainly due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The one thing we've seen last year, and we are clearly not through this thing yet, but the pandemic clearly reset the rules of engagement, and it has caused opportunities for organizations to reboot their organizations. If you take a look at the two biggest constituencies to be concerned about relative to this new normal, as we're calling it, first of all, you take a look at the customers and how have they changed? Well, clearly safety is top of mind. Safety has always been important, but now it's clearly top of mind. They're thinking twice about the businesses that they frequent from a mortar and brick standpoint. And those who come into their business, like your salesman, there's a concern about, are they safe? Have they been exposed? Are my employees going to be, exposed? So safety has really been top mind center for all the customers that we've got. Additionally, digital. It forced people into digital marketing, buying online. We saw about a 67% lift in online sales in March last year, and about 60% of that was people who were buying for the first time. At one point last year, Amazon was selling $10,000 a second. People who have never gone online before are now buying online. So digital now is a part of our life. A remote workforce. It used to be a perk. Now it's just a condition of employment. People are working from home. More and more are staying there. Organizations are seeing an opportunity to trim costs and have a remote workforce, where before it was just pretty much a consideration. Financially, customers are trying to get their footing back. This economy took a hit, the likes of the Great Depression, and I'm not exaggerating that. The McKinsey & Company did an extensive report on the pandemic and the economic impact, and it's been unbelievable, the things that we've seen, and you felt that in your business. And then the other thing is, that we got to deal with is this whole social economic issues that we're seeing, especially last year in the political arena that we had. There were social issues. You have an inequality gap. There's a lot of things going on with people today that they've got to deal with. And those are just your customers. Now you take a look at your employees. Like your customers, safety is top of mind. I mean, who would have ever thought that a safe workplace would probably become the #1 benefit? It used to be health benefits and stuff like that. And not that they're not important, they are. But today with the employees, am I going to go into a safe environment to work? That's the one thing they're thinking about. Working from home is now a part of their work environment. Our employee stress level is, I don't know how they dealt with it. They're working from home. They're teaching their children, which is extremely challenging, as the kids are on Zoom classes and the parents have taken on the burden of trying to teach the kids. They're trying to maintain their job. Chances are they've got elder parents or family members that they're taking care of and they're concerned. So our employees' stress is probably the biggest thing that we, all of us as employers, have to deal with. We didn't have to deal with all this stuff over a year and a half ago, but now it's front and center. So here's what we do know. We've got to rebuild the economy. Last count, I saw about 140,000 restaurants closed that are not coming back. New York City, I've got a lot of friends who live in New York City, and a lot of them are saying it's not going to come back this time. It's pretty much a ghost town. Revenue is down because people are moving. I do think the city will come back, but boy, it's going to take some strong leadership to make that happen. But the economy basically is crippled. We, as organizations, we have to reestablish our footing because, like I said, and we'll get into this, the rules of engagement have changed. And if you're playing by the same rules prior to the pandemic, that's probably going to hurt your organization moving forward because things are different. So we've got to chart a new course for the organizations that we're within. And that new course looks like this. One, we got to recognize there's a new customer buying experience out there. And what are those expectations that our customer have? And we got to find that out, and we have to make sure that we're meeting whatever our customers are expecting from us. Our employees, we got to make sure that they're feeling safe and that they're comfortable. And these are all the things you've been doing through this past year, but those things have stuck. It's not like these are issues that happened in 2021 and this too shall pass. No, these things are going to be here forever. And we got the new social economic norms widening. The one thing the pandemic did, it widened the inequality gap. And that's why we're seeing an awful lot of unrest and political divide based on that. And we've got an unknown future, and it's filled with an awful lot of uncertainty. The good thing is what we do know, we could take action on. But the biggest concern is the future. And what does the future hold? And that's the thing that concerns us because we're not exactly sure what that future holds. And that's something that we should be talking about within our organizations, trying to articulate what does the future look like for our organization, and then how do we strategize accordingly? So here's 3 questions as we begin this presentation that I would like you to think about throughout this presentation. Number 1 is, what is poor leadership costing your organization? And I'll come back and address each one individually. But I will tell you this, if we've got leaders in our organization that are not up to par, it is costing you money. The question is, how much? Number 2, what are the opportunities that your organization is missing simply because we don't have the leadership and the capacity and the ability to capitalize on these opportunities? And then the third thing are the leaders themselves. Do they have the capacity to lead your organization into an unknown future? If you looked out at your leaders today, do you feel confident that these are the leaders that can lead you into an unknown future? And if you're hesitant, and if you're not sure, which is fair, then we got to start thinking about, well, what do we do? Because I got to make sure I got an A team that's going to lead my company into the future, because an awful lot of people depend on a paycheck. A lot of families depend on a paycheck from my organization. So let's look at them individually. When I say, what is leadership costing your company? 3 things. Your strategy itself. If you have a strategy, the question is the strategy achieving its objectives? On a scale of 1 to 5, most strategies fall in right about a 2. 5 would mean we're really executing our strategy according to plan, but there's a massive gap between the strategy itself and the ability to execute that strategy. And how is leadership impacting your ability to execute your organization strategy? Number 2, human capital optimization. Everybody comes to work every day. You could see them, and you know what that's costing you. It's the biggest expense line on your P&L. But the question is, am I getting the full individual? Am I getting all of the individual? I'm getting their back and I'm getting their hands. I could see that, but am I getting their brain? On a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is I'm getting all of the employee, and 1 is basically they're sleepwalking through work. I'm getting nothing. Where is your organization at? And the challenge is to try to get all of the employee, because you're paying in their compensation and bonus, you're paying for all of the employee, But the question is, are you getting all of the employee? And that's a function of leadership. And then the other thing, and the biggest thing is probably, what are the opportunities we're missing simply because we don't have the right leadership? And, I'm of the opinion that when you look at opportunities, that is not the responsibility of the owner or the CEO or the executive team. It's everyone's responsibility, especially the leaders of your organization. It's their responsibility to have a radar up to try to see what are the opportunities for our organization. Let's identify them and let's seize them. That shouldn't be ignored and be written off to say, well, that's something the owner should be doing. An owner can't do it all. An executive team can't do it all. But collectively, owner, executive team, and leadership, yes, they could do it all. But what I'm seeing is in most cases, leadership is advocating that part of their responsibility. And then, the opportunities more specifically is, what about M&As? Are there any acquisitions that basically you're missing that you can't even pursue because when you look within your organization, you realize, I just don't have the horsepower to pull it off. Not just in M&A, but if you want to grow into new markets, and we have to grow today, we got to continually grow. Do I have the leadership that could allow me to grow into new markets? And then do I have the leadership that will allow me to attract top talent? If not, then my competition is getting the top talent. And then the last killer question is, do you have the type of leadership capacity in the organization to lead you into an unknown future? And by capacity, I mean, are your leaders, are they able to adapt and learn and continuously see change? If there was ever a time to do an assessment on your leadership, this is it. Because the one silver lining that the pandemic did give to us is the opportunity to step back and reassess our organizations and really decide, do I need to reboot my organization to move into this new normal since the rules have changed? So here's the areas that we're going to cover today on this call. 1, how do you assess your current leaders? 2, how do you identify some high potential up and coming, the next generation of your leaders? And then 3, how do you develop a leadership development pipeline that could take those high potential, up and coming, next gen leaders, get them into the pipeline, and then start developing their skills so that they're ready to lead you into the next generation. Now, there's only so much time that so many things that I can cover in a 1 hour time. So what I like to offer, I don't know if you could see, it looks like it might be cut off by the gallery, but I do have a 30-point leadership assessment that I will make available to the first 20 respondents at the conclusion of this presentation. All you got to do is email me. I don't know if you can see it, and it's just terrym@eps-i.com. Just send me an email, and in the subject line, put SLD. And the first 20, I will send you out that leadership assessment. And I'd highly suggest that you take the time, won't take you too long, to evaluate your organization's leadership. And then from that, there's a 3-point action plan. Once you do the assessment, the more important thing is, well, now what are you going to do? What's the next step? So I'll send that to the first 20 following the call. Before the pandemic hit, this is what things look like. And if I could probably boil it down to one word, I would say things were pretty much predictable. We knew what tomorrow was going to hold. Things were pretty much routine. We had the game plan, and then everything stopped. And the entire deck was reshuffled, and we're still trying to figure out probably the best path to move forward. So as I go through some of these leadership traits that a new normal or a post-pandemic leadership should look like, I want you to think of your organization. I want you to think of the leaders that you have in your company. And I want you to see if they have these traits. 1, they got to have a steady hand because these are uncertain times, but they got to stay steady at the helm. They got to be agile and adaptable. And a lot of folks in leadership positions, especially the ones that are getting closer to retirement, they are not agile, they're not adaptable. They don't want to change. Change means more work. The current organization was very kind to them. Why change now? Just hold on a few more years and I'm going to slide into retirement. Great for them, not good for you. Do our leaders seek, find, and exploit new opportunities? I would challenge your leaders, not just focusing on the numbers, but what new opportunities have they brought to you lately? Our leaders today need a healthy disregard for the impossible. I work for so many organizations and it's so much like, well, we can't do that, or we tried that in the past and that wouldn't work. We need to have a culture of what's possible, not what's impossible. And just because it didn't work one day doesn't mean it can't work today. But we've got to try to find a way to make things happen. So the question is, do your leaders have a healthy disregard for the impossible? We've got to challenge conventional wisdom and dogmas that's within organizations. I don't care how long we've been within a company, we should question these things. We should challenge these things. This isn't being insubordinate. It's somebody just trying to help the company get better. But if we just keep our mouth shut and our heads down and abide by the rules, that's exactly what your competition is hoping you do. You know, you need to change internally as opposed to being forced to change by a competitor. And one great way to do that is to have a leadership group that continually challenges how you do things. And we need leaders who are forward-leaning in their decisions. Are these decisions that's going to help us, not just for the present, but into the future? So as you look at these six, you know, ask yourself, hey, that really describes my leaders. And if it doesn't, then we got to get to work on that. And from these six, maybe you pick one that might be the most important to your organization, and that's the thing that you hone in on with your current and your future leadership team. Now, these are the basics of what leadership, you know, there's all kinds of leadership books, but I'll boil it down to three things. These are the three must-have, the basics 101 that every leader must do. Number one, they got to produce results. That's real simple, right? If they don't produce the numbers, they're probably not going to be here next year to get a second chance. But the question is, the results that they're producing, is that the potential? You know, just because, I mean, if you take a look at the people that work with your leaders, and if you take a look at the markets that they're in, and if you take a look at the customers that they call on, are they achieving the potential of their people, of their clients, of their markets? You know, it's interesting on the retail side. You know, somebody will talk about their retail convenience store and they'll say, you know what, we're producing results here that's top quartile. Okay, well, that's good. Top quartile is good. But the real question is, what's the true potential of the store, of this piece of real estate with this traffic count? Quite frankly, I don't care what top quartile is, what's the true potential? And that's the thing as you look out in your organizations, that your leaders and the people they lead and the markets they have and the customers that they're calling on, are they achieving the true potential? The second given is they got to lead. They're in a leadership position, they got to lead. But the question is, are they leading? Are they engaged, or are they merely present? And then the third thing is they got to develop future leaders. And if they haven't, well, what's the track record? Have they developed future leaders? And what has been their success rate? So of all the things we're going to talk about today with leadership, and all the things that I'm sure that you folks have relative to leadership, these are the basics. If they're not doing these things, then we got a bigger problem than we're going to talk about today. But these are the basics that every leader should be delivering. So now I want you to look at a leader from your employee's perspective. And yes, that is a silhouette of me. I saw a few of you smiling. You picked up on that very well. Very good. But now I want you to think about your employees. And if I had your employees on this call, would they be saying, yep, that sounds like my boss. Yep, she does that. Let's see how it would go. Are your leaders, are they exuding confidence that the rest of your employees are feeling? Are they calm during the storms? Are they consistent? That's the one thing people always look for out of their leaders, is a level of consistency. Do they provide clear direction, clear expectations? Do they hold people accountable? Do they have their employees' backs? And that's comforting for the employee, because they want to know that, does my boss have my back? And do the leaders, do they really create a spirit that we're in this whole thing together? So when you look at those 8 things, if your employees were sitting here, how would they rate their bosses? would they be saying, yeah, that sounds like my boss, or God, I wish I had that kind of a boss? Let me put it to you like this. Let's imagine, I'm going to put it in the context of a baseball team. Let's just say that your organization, it has 9 leaders. You have 9 key leaders in your organization. And each one of those 9 leaders, they represent 9 players that are on a baseball field. And if you're wondering where this is, I believe this is down in Miami. When I pulled this stock picture off, because Miami has some crazy stuff going in their outfield with the Dolphins. And I think that's the city of Miami out there. So if you're wondering what stadium that is, I'm pretty sure it's the Marlins. Oh yeah, it says it right here. I should have looked at that ahead of time. Marlins Park. So we're in Miami for this game. So this baseball team, this is your team. This is your team of leaders, okay? So you got 9 leaders out there. Of the 9, one of these leaders should have never been promoted out of the minor leagues. They're on the field. I don't know how they got promoted. They're in the big leagues now, but they probably belong down in double or triple A. Nevertheless, they're in a leadership position. I have another leader on the field, one of the players, and they're clearly not engaged in the game. I'm not sure where their head is. They're out in the field, but they're not engaged. I have another leader or a player out in the field, and this person is continually out of position. You know, the catcher's always calling a timeout, and he's always moving this guy to get repositioned. We go through this before the game, but for whatever reason, this guy he's just always out of position. The 4th player we have out there has no idea what the expectations are of him individually. Nobody really sat down now that he's in the major league to define what the expectations are of a major league center fielder. Then I have another player who's out there, the 5th player, and they're unsure how their contribution plays into the well-being of the team. I mean, how does the team better itself, or how does a team get better with my play out in left field? They have a hard time connecting the dots to their individual performance to the overall team performance. And then the 6th player of the 9, 6 of your 9 leaders, this person can care less whether the team wins or loses. They got their big contract over the fall or the summer. Now that they got the big money, they can care less whether the team wins or loses because they got theirs. So I just described 6 of the 9 players, or 67% of the team. So let me ask you, based on how I described those 6, what do you think the odds are of this team winning when I got 6 players out there that have their heads anywhere but in the game itself? And the point of all this is, in a fast-paced, highly competitive, continually evolving world, you win through leadership. Leadership matters. Leadership is a linchpin to winning. And for you Red Sox fans, I apologize for pulling up this Yankee picture, but they have one more of these babies than you Red Sox fans and my Pirates. So that's what employees need. But what do organizations need? What do you guys need out of your leaders? One, they got to take ownership for winning. That's not a responsibility of the owner. It's not a responsibility of the executive team. It's a responsibility, quite frankly, of everyone in the organization, but especially the leaders. They got to assume responsibility for the organization, the winning. That shouldn't be put on anybody else but all the leaders. They got to keep the organization focused. We live in a world of constant 24/7 distraction between our cell phones and emails and social media. Is distraction after distraction after distraction. And those organizations that have the ability to focus like a laser. And to give you a quick story on focus, many of you may know that Bill Gates and Warren Buffett are close personal friends. My mentor told a story one time. They were having lunch one day because they spend a lot of time socially and a lot of charitable organizations. But somebody was in a restaurant and saw Mr. Gates and Mr. Buffett having lunch. And this guy actually had the courage to walk up to them and ask them. He said, "Gentlemen, if I could ask you a question, what do you both attribute the one thing which you attribute to the key to your success?" And both Mr. Buffett and Mr. Gates simultaneously answered, focus. It's the ability to focus like a laser on the most important thing. If everything is important, then nothing is important. And with my coaching clients, I have them focus on no more than 3 things. That's it, just 3. And of those 3, what's the most important? What's the one thing that's got to get done? So keep the organization focused on the mission at hand is a key responsibility for your leaders. 2, they have to develop new strategies. When was the last time you looked at your strategy? Every strategy has an expiration date. And quite frankly, you may have developed your strategy 3 months ago. It may already be expired because things are moving that fast. But part of the job of leadership is not just to execute strategies, but to develop new strategies that are going to be working. And then they got to drive the strategy once they're not expired. Then you got to drive efficiencies. Organizations today must become bigger, better, faster. We got to squeeze out expense and make sure that what we do, your business model, is a model of efficiency. They have to ensure alignment between people and your strategy. You may have a great strategy, but do you have the people to execute the strategy? Do the people know what their role is in executing the strategy? And that's the job of leadership, to provide that conduit. And leadership's got to establish and maintain high standards throughout the organization. So as you look at these things, the questions you need to be asking yourself, does this sound like my leadership team? And the more important question is, if the answer is no, or I'm not sure, then the real important question is, well, what are you going to do next? What's your action step? Then we move into the second point of today's conversation is, how do you identify your high potentials? Hopefully you have a process in place, and this squarely falls on HR. HR is going to play a pivotal role here, but who is the next generation of leadership? Some of these younger folks that you hired several years ago, who are the ones that are starting to flash potential? We've got to start getting on that now, because as we've all seen, time goes by very, very quickly. And we've got to have a succession plan in place, not just for the owner, as important and as critical as that is, which is probably one of the most important things within an organization, is the succession plan of the owner, but also for key executive positions. All your critical positions, critical leadership positions, your CFO, your COO, HR, IT, your director of operations, all those key positions. If something happened to them tomorrow, what would happen to your organization? Do you have their replacement identified and ready to go? Do you have mini-me's for all the important people within your organization? And if you don't, then I hope that causes a lot of anxiety that will get you into action mode. Things happen. Things happen from a health reason. You can have your COO walk in tomorrow and say, listen, I got to go. My mother is ill. She's living alone out in Arizona. There's nobody there to take care of her. I'm just going to have to retire and go out and take care of her. And you were blindsided, caught flat-footed, never saw that coming. Now what are you going to do? It was a COO, or maybe it was your CFO or IT. So first, start with your mission critical positions, your executive team, those people that if something happened to them tomorrow and we could not backfill their position, it would have a direct and immediate impact on your organization. Start working with HR very, very hard to replace those folks first, and then cascade down into the next level of leadership. But do your mission critical positions first, and then drop down to the next level of leadership. But how do we identify who are some high potential candidates within our organization? So be on the lookout for leaders who are flashing leadership potential. And I'll explain what I mean by flashing. Now, these are people who are in individual contributor roles. They don't supervise or lead anybody at this point, but be on the lookout for them. And the one thing that we saw with the pandemic last year, and it was good news. I've got 11 study groups. Some of you may be familiar with the study group concept, but I have 11 study groups, about 139 companies, and it runs the gamut between owners group. I have 3 HR groups. I got 3 retail groups. These are folks that are responsible for the convenience stores. 2 transportation groups, and then I got a wholesale fuels group. And through the Zoom calls last year, the one thing we found was during a crisis is when leadership emerges, or it doesn't. We saw a lot of leadership, a lot of young people who were not in a leadership position step up and take leadership action during the crisis. And then we saw folks who were in a leadership position and they wilted. They were off the radar. They were off the grid. They were absentee. I don't know if they were frozen and not knew what to do, but it was shocking to me, some of the people, and quite frankly, that number surprised me, the size of it. Some of these folks just didn't show up when we needed them the most. The good news is there was a lot of young folks that did step up and start flashing that leadership potential. And I'll go through each one of these. But you want to give your high potentials meaningful assignments with greater responsibility to see how they're going to respond. And if you can, a meaningful assignment, it'd be great to give them some P&L responsibility. That's probably the most meaningful assignment. But don't give them a cupcake assignment. Hey, go do this Excel spreadsheet or go do this problem. Give them something that's going to have an impact on the organization. Assign mentors to your up and coming high potential. Now, obviously, you want these to be the best of the best, that who's going to be a mentor. You know, who are those people in your organization that sometimes you go to bed and I think, and geez, if I could just replicate him or her, man, my life would be so much better because they do such a great job for me. So find those kind of folks and make them the mentor for your next generation. And work teams. Work team is, think of a project in your organization that you can create a work team for. A work team is a great way to expose a high potential individual in terms of their knowledge, their skills, and then how do they get along with other people on the work team? Are they a work team member or do they take on a leadership role within the work team? But looking at each one of these, here's what I mean by flashing. If you're looking for someone who's flashing potential, what does flashing mean? These people are vocal. They're not very quiet. I don't mean complaining vocal, but they're always asking questions. You always hear them. They're not the quiet one in the room. They're always offering ideas for improvements. They ask a lot of questions, why and how. These are the folks that are a bit of a pain in the ass on the surface because they're always asking questions. But these are the people you want. And quite frankly, the millennials, a lot of the millennials have this kind of a profile. They have a high curiosity factor. They want to know. They don't know things, so they're always asking questions. They're always challenging organizations so they can understand better. So it really isn't them being a pain in the butt. It's just that's the type of person you want in a leadership role in the future. They're always impatient with results. And this is sometimes frustrating because they want things to happen like now, which is a good thing. But at the same time, you know, we got to work through some of these with them. They always question and challenge the status quo, and they always talk in terms of we in the team as opposed to individuals. So if you have some people in your organization and these characteristics, you know, kind of like relate to them, chances are that could be a potential leader sitting there in wait. So the question is, once they start flashing this potential, how do we get them into the pipeline, the leadership pipeline, to start developing them? And by the way, this is the Keystone Pipeline, by the way. The Canadian government was kind enough to loan it to me today for this presentation since they weren't getting much use out of it of late. So how do we get those people into the pipeline? HR runs the pipeline. This is HR. Now, HR might push back because they see this as a little bit more work. But they own it. They're the ones that have to develop it. They're the ones that have to maintain the pipeline. This squarely falls into the sweet spot of one of your HR directors. They got to develop, and this is where you and the executive team would probably come in. You know, what is the credential criteria for a high potential candidate? You know, a high potential candidate definition in one organization is clearly going to be different than another organization. But when you sit down and say, okay, in my company, this is what a high potential candidate looks like. The best way to start is, who are your best employees now? And you've got some great employees out there. Do a profile on them. what are their characteristics? What are their traits? What makes them tick? Just develop a model profile of your best employees now and say, if I can find more people like her, then we're going to be in good shape. So maybe that becomes the definition of a high potential. You simply profile some of your existing high potential or your existing leaders. If you feel you don't have a high potential leader within your organization right now, if you feel your leaders are average at best, then get out a clean sheet of paper and just start crafting. Just do the what if. If I can create this super leader for my organization, what would they look like? What are the traits? What are the characteristics? What are the competencies that they would possess? Once they're in the developmental pipeline, we got to develop an individual plan based on their developmental needs. Everyone's going to have different needs based on where they are in the pipeline. And this is the role of HR along with that candidate's supervisor. The supervisor is going to sit down with HR and say, look, here's what Mary's strengths are. Here's where her weaknesses are. She's got a couple blind spots. These are the areas that we have to work on with Mary. And then HR, in conjunction with that supervisor, will develop the individual development plan. And then that plan, it's almost like children. My son had, when he was younger, had a learning disability. And I believe they called him an IEP, where the parents would go into the school and sit down with the teacher and the principal. And that IEP was like an individual educational plan of how best to work through, in my case, my son Sean's, some of the challenges that he had with his learning disability, but it was customized for him. And this IDP for your leaders is customized to help them achieve their full potential within your organization. And by the way, this also serves as a retention plan. If the people in your organization see that you're investing in them, that you see them in a higher position within your company someday, odds are they're going to stay. As opposed to if you never say anything to them. Somebody said to me one time, well, if we have some high potential people who want to develop, should we tell them? And my response is yes, tell them. There's no guarantee they're going to continue in the pipeline all the way through. They may fail out of it, but you want to let them know how they're being seen in the organization and what you see their potential. If you don't have that conversation, they may leave you for a competitor thinking, I got no future here. I don't see where they're going to grow me. I don't see where I have bigger responsibilities. So have that conversation. No guarantee. Just because you've been identified at a high potential, we're going to start developing you. That's not a guarantee that you're going to be a high up executive team member someday. But right now, based on what we've seen, we've got plans for you. So do have that conversation. And then once in the pipeline, we got to monitor their progress and we got to make adjustments as needed. And then increased levels of responsibility on performance and based on performance and progress. As they're growing, as they're developing, give them more and give them more and continue to give them greater and greater responsibility until they raise their hand and say, enough, I can't take on that much more. And I'll have more respect for them for raising their hand saying, I can't take on that much more than trying to take it on and they start failing. But continue to give them as much as they can take, because that's how you're going to be testing them. And we've got to give them structured feedback. And HR will do that on behalf and in conjunction with their supervisor. We've got to have reviews, ongoing reviews, both formal and informal. How am I doing? Where are my weak areas? How am I developing? What do I need to focus on more? What do we not need to focus on as much because I'm strong in those areas? And when we're developing people, too many times we always try to focus on their weak area, and that's a waste of time. You want to focus on their strengths because their weak areas, only focus on that to the degree that it's manageable. But if you ever think you're going to take a weak area and turn it into a strength, the odds are you're not. We've all got some weak areas. And what happens are we take a look at people's strengths and we take a look at their weaknesses. And we say, well, we need to focus on their weaknesses. And all of our effort goes into their weaknesses. And the fact is, we only improve that weakness or weaknesses a little bit. There's some things we're just not good at. So all we want to do in the weakness areas is make it manageable, where they can get by and it's not going to hurt the organization. But what we do in our effort to improve the weakness, we ignore their strengths. And what we should be doing is making them even better in those areas that they're strong in. So make the weak areas workable, manageable, but you want to build on the strengths. They become even better. Now, just imagine, some of the things that we talked about, and I want to leave this open a little bit for some questions. I don't want to hit you with a lot of stuff and then say, see you later, without giving you some questions or to challenge me on some of these things. But imagine that everything we've talked about in this presentation was a business case on your organization. All the things that I said that leaders need to be, they are in your organization. All the things that your up and coming leaders need to be and to identify them, the pipeline, you have all that stuff going on. Imagine what your company would look like if it was a model for what we just discussed. How would your results be different? How would your balance sheet be different? How would you be positioned in the marketplace if all these things were coming to pass? And whatever that is, one thing is what I would challenge you is take action on one thing from this presentation, just one thing. And if you get the leadership assessment after this, take action on one thing. I want you to just, when we're done here today, before you rush off and start checking email or returning phone calls or getting on to the next thing, I would encourage you just to take a few minutes and just pause and just reflect on a couple of things that we talked about and try to come up with just one thing. What's one nugget of information that we talked about in today's session that you want to take action on? What's the biggest thing that would have the biggest impact on your organization? You got to do a small thing, because if we do nothing and think, well, this was somewhat entertaining. 2 o'clock is kind of a lull time of my day. I just killed a good hour, so that was fun. And then we go on our day. We just wasted 60 minutes, and you're never going to get that 60 minutes back. There's 1,440 minutes in a day. That's it, 1,440 minutes. And you can't get that time back. You can always get money. You can make more money. You can buy more clothes. You can buy more food. You can buy more stuff. But the one thing we can't get in life is our time back. So I would encourage you, when you're done today, just take a pause, take a few minutes and think about this presentation and do one thing. Just take one action that can help move your company forward. So here we go and wrap up a couple key points. This is what we covered today. We talked about your current leadership. And maybe what you do, and I said to take a pause and think about this presentation, maybe you just stop right here and think about your current leaders. Do you feel confident that that's a leadership team that's going to take you into the future? And by the way, the future is here. Is that leadership team, are you confident with them that they're going to navigate you through the post-coronavirus pandemic? And if you've got some concerns about your leadership or certain individuals on your leadership, then what's the game plan? Can we get them skills? Can we skill them up? Can we get them training? Can we get them coaching? Do we need to cut them loose? Whatever the case is, a chain really is only as strong as its weakest link. I want you to think of that baseball team. If you got 9 leaders, do you have some of those players in your organization that aren't engaged, only care about their individual results, always out of position, don't know what the expectations are? You got to fix that. One player can make a big difference. And then who are some of the up and coming future leaders? Who are the ones that are starting to flash some potential? And if you sense them, then let's start ramping them up now. And the reason why we're going to start getting them ready now is things happen in life. People take ill, personal issues come into pass, things happen. And sometimes people leave our organization and we're not prepared for that. We're caught flat-footed. And if they're in those critical positions, then we're really caught and taken for a loop. And then get with HR, HR, and just ask them, say, by the way, do we have a leadership development pipeline in your organization? And if they say no, say, look, we got to sit down and, we got to figure this out. Because if our competition is on this and we aren't, then they've got the advantage, not us. But this is something, like I said, HR owns this and they got to help you with that leadership development pipeline. So I want you to rethink your core assumptions within the organization, because the assumptions that allowed your organization to be a success before the pandemic are probably going to be the wrong assumptions as we head into, and as we are now into this new normal and continue through this pandemic. Get with your executive team and let them get all their assumptions out. Assumptions in terms of our company. What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are we better at than our competition? Assumptions about your competition. Who is your competition? Are there people that we're not seeing? Assumptions about our customers. Assumptions about what our customers want. Assumptions about technology. But you rethink through your core assumptions, because I'll guarantee you they're probably expired. Prior to the pandemic, like I said, it's created a complete reboot. And by the way, it's interesting when you do something like this, because I've been with organizations and you get the executive team in there and you start questioning them about the company, the direction, our strengths, our weaknesses. And you can have an executive team of, like, say, 6 people. And based on a conversation, you would think we're talking about 6 different companies. They're that far off the page. One company, but yet they see the world differently. They see your competition differently. They see your people differently, and they see the direction of your organization differently. So it's great to get with your executive team and explore with them their core assumptions, what their thought processes are. Because, by the way, alignment is important. You need alignment of your business model to your strategy, to your brand positioning, to your people. You got to put those things together. If an executive team, if they themselves are not aligned, if they think of it as a rowboat, not a rowboat, those like boats in college sports, typically the Ivy League, those big row teams. You got this big long boat. I think they got about maybe eight rowers in there. I want you to think of alignment in terms of that. That boat, that rowboat, is symbolic of your organization. Now, you want to get your executive team in that rowboat. Well, some come in, they sit backwards. Some come without the oar. Some come unprepared. Some come with their leg out of the boat in the water. And they should all be in the right position, ready to go, properly trained, oars in their hand. And if the executive team is not aligned, then the rest of the organization has no chance. It's got to start at the top. And a great way to start at the top is to sit down with your key leadership team, your executive team, and start going through, what are our assumptions? And are those assumptions still valid? I'll guarantee you 50% of them are not, because of what happened last year. It's changed. The deck has been reshuffled. Redefine success for your organization in this post-coronavirus pandemic. What does success mean now? I would inflict violent change on your status quo. I would question it. I would debate it. I would challenge the dogmas within your organization. I would blow everything up and start with a white piece of paper. There should be no sacred cows. Holding on to the past could be suicide. Think strategically and then plan systematically. Speed trumps perfection. I've got a thing that I use for my coaching clients. It's called PBP, progress before perfection. Don't wait for every I to be dotted and every T to be crossed and everything to be perfect. Apply the 80-20 rule. If you're coming up with a new strategy or new initiatives, look around the room and say, are we 80-20? Meaning it's 80% baked. It's not 100%, it's 80%. And if we're 80%, let's go. We'll figure out the other 20% as we're implementing this strategy. Organizations that are going to win today, they need to be, it's like a vehicle. They need to be driving down a highway 100 miles an hour with the ability to change the lug nuts without ever stopping. Speed will beat scale. How do you beat a bigger company? Speed. Speed will always trump perfection, and speed will trump scale as well. Scale is a wonderful thing. But if I had to pick one thing, I'd want a speedy organization, speedy decision-making, speed to implementing your strategies in the field. Speed could kill a slower organization because they're bogged down with a bureaucratic system of decision-making. And with our employees, especially at the leadership level, we either improve or we remove. And then intercept the future by creating it versus waiting for it to arrive. What do you want the organization to look like in years to come? What's your vision for your company 3 to 5 years from now? Well, let's get to work on that right now. And then a final question is, why do so many leaders fail? Lack of accountability. We do not hold our leaders accountable. Our leaders do not hold their people accountable. There just seems to be no level of accountability. And an organization is really never going to thrive unless everybody is accountable to everybody else in the organization. I always come back to the same phrase. There's a lot of families that depend on this organization, your organization, and the paychecks. They have kids in colleges. They have, loans they got to pay back. They like to take a vacation. A lot of folks depend on the organization being here today, tomorrow, into the future. And we won't be if it's an organization that does not hold everybody accountable. This smoke has not settled yet on the pandemic. And we're starting to get a glimpse of some things right now as we came out of this whole thing. But like I said, it really created an opportunity here. I was taught one time a long time ago by an early boss of mine. He said, listen, he said, how did he phrase that? He said, nothing in our life ever that happens to us that's bad does not come with a silver lining. He said, I don't care how bad the situation is, professionally or personally, anything that's bad, it's got a silver lining buried within it, but you have to go look for the silver lining. Silver linings don't fall from the sky into our lap. So a great question to ask your executive team, especially this last year where it's been doom and gloom, and rightfully so. None of us has ever lived through anything like this. And thank God we're all healthy enough to be on this call today. But when it's been such a negative doom and gloom type of situation, let's try to change the lens. And I would challenge your executive team, where's the silver lining for us? Where's the opportunity? Because if you as a team is looking for that silver lining, if you're looking through all the bad stuff for the opportunity and your competition isn't, then advantage you. At the end of the day, leadership matters. And it probably matters more now than ever. So with that, I wanted to save a little bit of time at the end, Morgan. If there's any questions that you would like me to entertain, we could do that if you'd like.
Terry, thanks so much for that presentation. Morgan, sorry to interrupt. I don't know if you had a question or not.
Oh, no, I'm good.
But we have a few minutes. If you wanted to put a question in the chat, please do so. I'll start things off, Terry, while we wait for questions to come in. First of all, I think everyone on the call has sympathy for you being a Pirates fan. So sorry about that. And then I will say, you mentioned post-pandemic leadership traits. What would you say is on the list now that wasn't on the list or wasn't as high on the list pre-pandemic?
I think they got to be bold. They got to be bold in their strategies. They got to be bold in some of the things that they want to do. If the rules of engagement have changed, which they have, then let's rewrite them to our favor. I think organizations today, Vijay, when I look at their strategies, they're not bold enough. It's be big or go home. So we need leadership today to be a lot bolder in their thoughts and what they want to do and achieve. I don't want to achieve a 5% increase over sales. Let's go 15% over last year. Let's really go big. We got to be bigger, better, bolder.
Thanks so much.